Hello there, algebras, and welcome to Chapter 1, Lesson 4, Notes. And yes, this is what happens when you divide by 0. All right, so we're today going to talk about undefined fractions and how we are not allowed to have 0 in the denominator of a fraction. This is actually going to be kind of a short video today. And then we'll do a few examples and you'll have your homework to get started on there. But just so you know, this is Ray. Well, that's the butt of Ray. Say hi, Ray. Ray. So you met Isis in the other video. This is Ray. 2 black cats living with us, both female. Lots of fun. All right. A fraction is undefined when the denominator bottom of the fraction equals 0. So the bottom of your fraction cannot be a 0. Okay, you can't divide by 0. That's basically what we're saying. Very important information, right? I make jokes with memes, but it's very important that we not divide by 0. I believe there was a point in time where you could ask Siri to divide by 0 and she told you some crazy things. So maybe that still happens. I don't know. Try it later, right? What we're going to talk about today is sometimes we have to be aware that if we're using fractions and we have a variable in a denominator, that we have to be careful to make sure we don't end up having that variable equal 0, right? Or let's say the denominator, if that variable is another number, and then it adds or subtracts with other things in the denominator, your whole denominator ends up being 0. So the goal here is we're going to figure out what value for our variables would make our denominator undefined, would make our whole fraction undefined, and we're going to avoid that value, okay, when we're dealing with our stuff. All right? So if there's a variable in your denominator, okay, and notice I haven't even mentioned numerators yet. Numerators are a non-starter when it comes to all this because it's only the denominator being 0 that makes something undefined. If there's a 0 in your numerator, you just have nothing. So there's nothing to worry about, but you can't divide by 0. So what you do is you take the denominator out and you create your own equation where you've set the denominator equal to 0. And then you solve that equation, right? So I'm trying to get this x alone. So, okay, let's subtract 7 from both sides. I get negative x equals negative 7. Well, I need a positive x, so let's divide everything by negative 1, and I get that x equals 7. If x equals 7, you're going to get an undefined fraction, right? Because you're going to get your denominator equaling 0. So an x value of 7 would make this fraction undefined. So the way that we're going to write it is that x cannot be equal to 7. Okay? Because that's the one value that if you plug that in for x, this fraction is no longer a defined fraction. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at some other examples. Okay? Again, only looking at the denominator. Take this out. X plus 5 equals 0. So set it equal to 0. And then get x alone. So opposite of positive 5 is negative 5. Subtract 5 from both sides. You get x equals negative 5, is what would make this fraction undefined. So what we say is we say x cannot equal negative 5. Okay? That's how we state our final answer for stuff that would make our fractions undefined. Okay, again, let's take this denominator. Let's bring it out. Let's set it equal to 0. Okay, let's take that denominator out, set it equal to 0. Now let's get x alone. So we'll start by subtracting 10 from both sides because the opposite of a positive 10 is a negative 10. Bring down your negative 2x, your equal sign, and your negative 10. Opposite of multiplying by negative 2 is dividing by negative 2. So I'll divide both sides by negative 2. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So if x is equal to 5, your denominator is equal to 0. So we have to say that x cannot be equal to 5. Okay. And last but certainly not least, let's take this denominator and set it equal to 0. And again, we're getting x alone, so the opposite of a positive 1 is a negative 1. Let's subtract 1 from both sides. You get 2x equals negative 1. The opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. And I can see already there's going to be a slight difference here. The other two were whole numbers, well, an integer and a whole number, right? So here, 1 is a smaller number than 2. It cannot be evenly divided by 2. So I'm just going to bring down the whole fraction as my answer. X cannot equal negative 1/2. All right. And again, rational numbers, irrational numbers, they could be our answers to these as well. All right. I'm going to throw a question in here and I'm going to pause it for a second, or you should pause it for a second to try these practice problems and then come back and I will go over those with you. Oh, I don't have my little pause feature. Huh. Okay. Well, hopefully you guys are pausing it because I'm going to insert a question anyway. Let me head back. All right. Really, right now? Getting some sass from Ray Ray. Okay. Oh, by the way, if you can look at this and you know what the answer is, then you don't have to take the whole denominator down and set it equal to 0 and then solve like an equation. But if you can't just look at it and know what that value for x that would make the whole denominator undefined is, then this is what you do. Okay, so it's, if you can see it, great, do it that way. If you can't, do it this way. So now we want 3x alone, so we subtract 6 from both sides. We get 3x equals negative 6. Divide both sides by 3 to get x alone, and we get x cannot equal negative 2. And we do state it as x cannot equal, right? Okay. Here, we get 5y equals 0, right? And to get y alone, we would divide both sides by 5. Now remember, over here, this is a fraction of 0 divided by 5, right? So it's not having a 0 in a denominator. All right, so that's okay. So here, this 0 divided by anything ends up being 0. So in this case, y can actually not equal 0 as a number. It could equal other numbers, but it can't equal 0. Because if we plug 0 in here, we get 0 in a denominator. And last but certainly not least, 3x minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 first. 3x equals 1. Divide by 3. You get x equals 1/3. Notice I don't shy away from leaving answers as fractions in fraction form, right? I did that up here, and I just did that right here. Okay, so that's typically how I'll leave my answers, is in fraction form, because it's usually the more exact form of an answer. Okay, it's more exact than writing 0.3 repeating. So, there we go. All right, guys, that's it. That's how we make undefined fractions. A few multiple choices for you and then a couple of short answers, but I think you got this. So let me know, and I will see you very soon. Have a great night.